morning, everyone. Good morning, everyone. If we could ask you to take your seats, I'd like to get started. Please take your seats. Can we ask everyone to sit down, please? Not a well-behaved crowd. We ask you all to sit, please. Find a seat. Everyone, can you please find a seat? We'd like to get going. Thank you. Well-behaved crowd, that's what we like. Good morning, everybody. On behalf of the Jeffrey family and the six of us and Agnes's extended family, we wanted to welcome you all here today and thank you for joining us in this celebration of the life and times of Dr. Agnes Doody. Couple of program notes. We are streaming this live, so there are many more people who are joining us today. And for you as well, you will be able to pick this up as a recorded item as well in the future if you want to look at it again. Couple of quick announcements. There's no public burial or collation following the events today, but we invite you to linger and look at the memorabilia that's around the room and share your stories with friends at the end of the program. We also encourage those of you who wish to pay tribute to Dr. Doody to consider donating to the Agnes G. Doody Scholarship Fund here at URI. Scholarship Fund exists to underwrite scholarships for students who wish to pursue the study of communication studies. They're based on need and merit, and your gifts to that would help extend the legacy of Dr. Doody's commitment and support to students, so we encourage you to participate in that regard. My name is Doug Rubenstein, and I am one of a small nation of URI graduates who carry the moniker of former student of Dr. Doody. My particular distinction is that I was the first graduate of her fledgling speech communication studies program, which Agnes created in the mid-'60s. I was an expatriated pharmacy student who was drawn to Dr. Doody's public speaking class and was smitten from there on. I was her little, actually, science project that she tinkered with and glued together in the basement of One Post Road to form the vision of this new major. But Agnes really believed that through the discipline of speech communication, we could better understand ourselves and learn to better understand others. As students of her know, she engaged her students with that blend of tough love and inspiration and seemingly impossible challenges to make you reach higher. Agnes had a way of looking you in the eye and getting you to imagine what your life could be like if it was void of your fears, your demons, your insecurities, your pride, or procrastination. Imagine what you could be capable of. She would force her students to face their fears and insecurities and demons, but she would also help them overcome them with courage, determination, and resolve. And ultimately, she taught students the reverence for and the power of communication. And she introduced this major, by the way, in the turbulent 1960s, when cultures, cultural redefinition, racial redefinition, gender redefinition was in full force. And by the way, there were no computers, no cell phones, no emails, no texts, no Facebook, no Instagram, no Twitter. We actually had to learn to talk to each other. What a concept, right? The results Dr. Doody achieved were extraordinary, as she turned out legions of young women and men who graduated from URI inspired to make a difference in their individual fields. Some of them are here today. I am particularly gratified to be celebrating the life and times of Dr. Agnes Doody in this auditorium, which 13 years ago I played a small part in creating. But I have to tell you, if Agnes were here right now, she'd be all over me about why we are not serving shots of Jameson Irish whiskey to everybody in the room to liven it up. But just like the smoothness and character of Irish whiskey, we have a lineup of speakers this morning who will bring you warm and unforgettable vignettes of the life and times of Agnes Doody. So let's get right to them. Our first speaker was a dear friend of Agnes's, and someone I have an enormous amount of respect for, having worked together on this auditorium. Let me introduce retired professor and dean of arts and sciences at URI, Dr. Winnie Brownell.
Thank you, Doug. Dr. Agnes Doody, I don't have to tell you, was a legendary professor and outstanding professional who helped everyone become capable, all that they are capable of being. I remember the first time I saw her. It was November 1970 in New Orleans. I was there for the National Communication Association convention to interview for my first job. And I decided the night before my interviews I would go to Preservation Hall, where the old traditional jazz was born. And I went there, and there was this woman, what a vision, looking so regal, with a golden bun like a crown on top of her head, a beautiful cream and black pantsuit, holding a walking stick like a scepter. She was absolutely a visionary. And I couldn't forget her. The next morning, I went to the placement center, and there was this sea of men, all wearing tweed coats, narrow black ties, white shirts, black slacks, black shoes, and carrying a black briefcase, and one woman. And that woman was wearing a purple pantsuit and spike purple heels. And I thought, you know, she's not on my list of universities my mentor gave me, but I'm going to interview with her. Imagine my surprise when I got up closer and I realized there was a woman from Preservation Hall. And she looked at me and she said, with all of your research interests, why do you want to come to an undergraduate program? Tell me about your teaching philosophy and your teaching standards. And she was the only person who interviewed me who asked anything about teaching and learning. It was clear to me, and she made it very clear, that teaching and learning at URI were really critical. She was trying to build a program. She wanted to help students become all they were capable of being. And I knew at that point I had to go to URI, and I hoped she would select me. And she did. I really was amazed as I learned over the years how she continued to teach, not only undergraduates, but her colleagues, administrators, and alumni. And she really was passionate, not just about people, but about causes and programs. She was always on a mission to accomplish something. And she never would accept a low-level no. She would encourage us, if somebody tells you no and it's your dream, don't give up right away. I could always tell when she was really committed to the mission because there was that purple pantsuit, the purple spike heels, and the purple pen. And she would prance into the college meeting or the faculty senate And I knew she was going to win the debate, without question. She also advocated for faculty who had, she felt, been unjustly denied promotion. And I know all too well what her support meant to me and so many others as she challenged the president of the university, the provost, even the governor of the state of Rhode Island. And she usually won. As I was leaving work very late one night in this building, I noticed her light was still on, and I was worried because I thought, gee, am I the only crazy person here? I knocked on her door to see if she was okay, and there she was with a young man from a school in Providence that was not known for being terrific, and she was helping him with his writing. And I could tell how grateful he was. And she said she couldn't talk to me then. They were busy, but she would talk to me tomorrow. And the next day she told me she thought it was absolutely criminal that schools would give this sort of passive promotion to young people, whether they learned what they were supposed to or not. And she said, we need to realize that it's never too late to learn. She not only cared about the valedictorians who needed an extra challenge so they wouldn't be bored, but she also cared about everybody else and especially was gifted at rescuing the perishing, the students who might have been given up throughout their entire education, because she knew they could learn and she knew they could flourish. I knew she deserved a lot more in addition to the wonderful Teaching Excellence Award at URI, which of course she received. Thanks to my colleague, Rich Catula, who told me about an issue in Communication Quarterly where they were going to be featuring the best teachers of the past century. And he suggested, have you ever thought about writing a piece about Agnes? And I said, absolutely. And I was a young professor. I thought, what chance do I have out of the entire nation submitting manuscripts? But of course, mine was accepted. And I brought it here tonight if you'd like to see it. She was also very kind to me because I said I was doing research on a piece. I didn't tell her what I was doing. And she mentioned, that maybe I might want to interview some of her former students. So she handed me tons of grade books. I mean, she saved them all. And I just picked names out of different times, including Doug Rubenstein and Harry Potter, who are here today. And every single one of them told me stories about Dr. Agnes Doody. Every single one said she made all the difference in their lives. And I was so impressed by this that I kept thinking after the article was published, I need to do more. I need to tell more people. And so the National Communication Association was doing a series, one a year, on Teachers on Teaching. And I nominated her, and I sent in the article. And they accepted her, and she did this master class on teaching in Miami, Florida, and was magnificent. No surprise to you. I enjoyed so much over the years working with Agnes. There are too many stories to tell about 53 years, but I do want to acknowledge Dr. Steve Wood, who was chair of the department, and according to Agnes, the best chair ever, although I think he might have been in a tie with Agnes. And I'll never forget his purple pantsuit. If you went to her retirement party, I'm so sad his wife wouldn't let him keep it because he'd be wearing it today. But he did a magnificent job wrangling everyone for her retirement bash, which had the largest attendance ever. And I loved working with Doug Rubenstein as we planned the Agnes Doody Scholarship and the shadow boxes at the back. And by the way, this lectern is unlike any in the world. This I commissioned from sculptor Ben Anderson, who's chair of the art department here, and told him about Agnes, and he loved the bun. And so you see, her bun is here in perpetuity. One day, I received a bizarre call from my son John's school, the South County Montessori School. He was in preschool at the time, and she said, I'm so worried about your son. He always is so factual. We have this thing called Morning Circle, and we give reports on what we did the day before. And she said, your son said, yesterday, I met the Queen of the World. She invited me to her castle. I met her handsome king. She had a gown that went to the floor, and her hair went to the floor too, just like Rapunzel. And she had earrings almost to her shoulders. And she said, I've never heard of such a wild thing from John before. And I started to laugh. And I said, yesterday, I took my son to a party hosted by Dr. Arthur Jeffrey and Dr. Agnes Doody. And she goes, Dr. Doody from URI, he did meet the Queen of the World. I will love you forever, Agnes. Thank you.
Thank you, Winnie. Our next speaker is Mr. Leo Arsenault of the Wakefield Rotary Club, who is a fellow Rotarian with Agnes for many, many years. Leo?
There's another individual that really wanted to be here today. He was a superintendent of the Rhode Island State Police. An exceptionally great, and I mean great, friend with Agnes. He sent me a note on the reasons why he couldn't be here. He had a family commitment and he just couldn't make it. I would like to read just a couple lines of that note. Please give my best to Drew and the family. Agnes was a special person in my life and in the lives of so many others. She is probably raising havoc right about now in the heavens. She and Ed had a relationship that just would not quit. If he were here, he would share some really interesting stories. I want to share one of them. Ed was trying to convince Agnes to back off on her speed while driving an automobile. Now, here he was, top cop of Rhode Island. And he was trying to impress to her that, you know, things could happen. Now, he told her that if it continues, I'm going to call some of my troopers and give them your license plate number, and they will be patrolling South County, and they're going to be looking for you. That was left that way for about, maybe 2 or 3 days. Agnes came to me. Now, she didn't know that I knew of their conversation, there we go. And she's telling me the whole story. Then she says, can you imagine he's going to give my license plate number to the troopers? Do you think he'd really do that? Agnes, I have no idea. But, you know, back it off. We all know that Agnes had a little bit of lead in her right foot on the accelerator. So I told her, I said, just back off a little bit, which she did for a little while. November 1988. That was the month and the year that the first woman joined the Rotary Club in Wakefield, Rhode Island. That woman just happens to be Mrs. Agnes Doody. Agnes was a great Rotarian. Her sponsor, by the way, was a Mr. Spencer Martin, who was an accounting professor here at URI. Keep in mind now, this is 35 years ago. Some of the older members in the club really didn't understand why women would want to join an all-man function or club or gathering. Agnes got wind of that. How she did it, I had no idea. But she got rid of all of the underlying comments or whatever, and all of that went to bed. It was all put away, and nothing more was said. That was Agnes, handling something on her own, and she did it. She was a great Rotarian. She worked hard for Rotary. She spent a lot of time in working with some of the younger members that would come into the club, explaining what Rotary was all about and what your commitment should be to Rotary. Some of you may remember our balloon festival that we had right down the road. Agnes's responsibility at the balloon festival was selling T-shirts, hats, pins, whatever happened to be in that retail tent. It was a Sunday afternoon. Relative humidity was off the chart. Temperature was 80 plus, basically the heat that we've had in the last 2 or 3 days, weeks rather. Agnes was in the tent selling T-shirts, and I happened to be walking by the tent. And I says, Agnes, I didn't realize you had retail experience. Right out of the clear blue, I received the Agnes Doody finger wave. Some of you probably seen that finger. Leo, you do what you have to do to get the job done. You do what you have to do to get the job done. That was Agnes. Now, some of us would get invited to the Doody compound on One Post Road for a libation or two. And her favorite drink, as it was mentioned, was Jameson. So with that in mind, Agnes, this is for you. May you rest in peace, and thank you for your friendship. Thank you.
Where are you going with that bottle? Thank you, Leo. Our next speaker is Mr. Harry Potter, former student, mentee, and lifetime friend who shared a mother and son relationship with the doc, as he referred to her, for nearly 45 years. My friend Harry Potter.
The doc. Boy, I love that lady. Yes, it is true that my name is Harry Potter. No joke about that. But as the doc would say, I'm the original. First, I would like to express my condolences to Dr. Doody's family and friends. It's good to see some of you. It's really nice to be back, that you're here. Thank you so much. Secondly, thank all of you for coming to celebrate and reflect on this beautiful soul, this transformational human being that I was blessed to know and who has changed my life forever. Knowing the doc She wouldn't want me to stand up here and talk a lot about her. However, I'm sure that she will allow me to say a few things about our 45-year journey knowing each other. This is new technology, by the way. Tried it home last night. And Winnie, you touched on it. I might have been that student that was sitting in that room that night. Yes, yes. How did I meet her? I even gave it a name. It's called The Encounter. It was 1978. I was a sophomore. It was my sophomore year. I was a student in the talent development program. And I was looking for, like most of us do, an easy A to support my cumulative average. I registered for a communications course entitled Interpersonal Communications, held in Independence Hall on Tuesdays and Thursdays. While sitting in the class of 15 students, check this out, an old lady-like, grandmother type, with her signature braided crown and her purple scarf walked into the class. I said to myself, easy A here. I got this one beat. I like that lady. I don't even know her. So the class spent the entire session on discussing interpersonal and verbal communications. And at the end of the class, as Doc would do, the doc gave a writing prompt, a writing prompt, and said to us, I'm going to collect this and grade it, so do your best. So on Thursday, the doc strolled in again with her signature purple. But this time was different. I noticed she had her purple Sharpie. Classic. The class ended and she returned the written prompt with grades on it. I noticed on my paper, however, she wrote a big question mark, circled in purple, with a note that said, "See her after class." Now, I'm looking around, no one else got that. I didn't do nothing wrong in class. So, in retrospect, little did I know that that conversation that I would have in her office would transform my life forever. Let's talk about that conversation. During the office meeting, the doc told me this. Never forgot it. She didn't even know me. She said, "Young man, you are," and she said, "functionally illiterate." I'm looking at her. Now, under my breath, there's a lot of things going on, right? And I'm saying, who's this lady saying this stuff to me? I don't even know her. But then she said, but wait a minute. She said, you know, that Providence School Department had ripped you off of your education, and that the university right now was ripping you off. And then she said this, "It stops now, it stops here." And she said, "Harry, picture this." And I have this ingrained in my mind. "Harry, you are on a bike with training wheels, and we have to get you off." That was the mantra going forward. She said, "If you're willing to meet with me on every Tuesday and Thursday during my office hours, then I'm willing to work with you to become a greater writer." And then, with her purple pen, she gave me my first marching order of millions. She instructed me to go over to the bookstore to purchase the Little Brown Handbook. And with that Little Brown Handbook, get the workbook and start on chapter 1. Ladies and gentlemen, this is that Little Brown Handbook. I've had this book for 45 years. This is our connection. We would spend the next 2 years and beyond working on my writing in the Little Brown Handbook. And we used this Little Brown Handbook as a Bible. Even 30 years later, Dr. Doody and I relied on a Little Brown Handbook in our daily lives, as evidenced in this postcard that she sent to me on May 5th, 2008. She says, "Dear Harry, I just thought of you. I had to go out and get the Little Brown Handbook to check on the rules for the use of indefinite pronouns. Love me. That's the doc. Now, this is 30 years later. She wrote that. That's how I met her. We're going to fast forward to 1982. Now, during the summer of '82, with the support of the doc, I was enrolled in a program called CLEO. CLEO is the Council on Legal Education Opportunities, held at Emerson College, Dr. Doody's alma mater. While preparing to go to law school with the support of CLEO and Dr. Doody, tragedy struck my family. My sister Brenda passed away at the age of 31. I called the doc and informed her of my sister's passing. She supported me emotionally and reassured me that things would be okay. After our conversation, I went home for a few days to attend my sister's homecoming celebration, which was held at Bell's Funeral Home, located on Broad Street in south side of Providence in the heart of the hood. That's important to note. It really is. Well, as we were viewing and going through the ceremony, my brother taps me on the shoulder and says, "Hey, is that your professor friend walking towards the casket?" So I popped up. I said, "Oh my Lord. Oh my God, it's the doc." She was dressed beautifully, wearing a gorgeous hat. I stumbled into her arms and cried. She held me. Then I introduced her to my mother and the Potter family. We talked a bit in the hallway. I walked her back to her car, and she drove off into the sunset. But how significant was that? That she would come to South Providence to support Harry Potter. That meant a lot to me. That's what you call support. One more. Fast forward to 1998. In 1998, as principal of Hope High School, I was charged with, principals get charged with a lot of stuff. One was to design Hope High School into 4 learning communities. And once again, I called on the doc to support me. And this time, not only did she support me, she supported the school community by serving as the co-chair for the Strategic Planning Committee. She served for 2 years, resulting in the faculty adopting a plan to redesign the school. Now, so it's clear that Dr. Doody gave me a lifetime of support, a lifetime of friendship, a lifetime of mentorship and encouragement. And that relationship was like in the likeness of a mother's unconditional love. That's how I felt about that with her. She never judged me. Even when I got in trouble, she never judged me. I know she's gone now. I know that. I've been feeling that. I've been feeling it for a while. But her legacy still lives on in the thousands of students that I impacted throughout my life as an educator. I will always cherish those fun memories at One Post Road, the catered parties, the helicopter incident. We can talk about that at another point. The laughter, the conversations, and most of all, the relationships. I will always love that lady in purple. In closing, we come full circle to the Little Brown Handbook. And during our many lunches at Capitol Grill, she loved it. And I could tell you telling stories about who had to get there first to pay. She would never want me to pay, but I had to get there early to give my credit card to the waitress, so she didn't pay. But anyway, during the lunchtime, I said, "Doc, would you do me a favor and sign my book?" So I leave you with that. Here's what she said. This is a guy that was functionally illiterate. And she says, to Harry, a brilliant writer, a superb human being, and someone I love with all my heart. Love, Doc. So, rest, Dr. Doody, for your work has ended. Ours still continue. Love you, Doc, eternally. Thank you.
Thank you, Harry. Always a touching story. As you were entering this morning, you were listening to the beautiful acoustic guitar music played by Michael Strickland. Back in 1975, Agnes and her husband Arthur were looking for a student to help with the upkeep of the grounds and the haying of the fields of the 13-acre estate known as One Post Road. Michael Strickland, who was a student at URI at the time, applied for and got the job. That began a lifelong devoted friendship and close family relationship with Agnes that lasted nearly 50 years, right up to the morning of the day she passed, when Michael held her hand. Here with a musical tribute to Agnes and her Irish heritage is the very talented Michael Strickland playing the Irish melody Shiva Shiva.
My hands are completely wet from drying tears, so I'm blaming it on every one of those speakers.
Thank you, Michael. Our next speaker is also a close member of Agnes's extended family for over 45 years. My friend Nancy Strickland, Michael's wife.
"43 years ago, I became smitten with a soccer player whom I met in a bar in Newport, a friend of a friend. On our second date, he took me to dinner at the home of his friends in Wakefield, who were professors. We pulled into their home at One Post Road and walked into the dining room. And I saw a table set with 3 forks, 3 spoons, 2 knives, 3 plates, and 2 glasses at each seat. Spectacular silver candelabras were lit. Fresh, colorful flowers were in a crystal vase in the center of the long mahogany table in the formal dining room. It was an elegant table fit for a king, or shall I say queen. Anyway, not quite how I ate dinner growing up in a family of 9 in suburban New Jersey. During that dinner, I immediately saw that Agnes and her husband, Dr. Arthur Jeffrey, adored Mike. They never had their own children together, and he had become like their adopted son. And I had no idea that I was about to be under tremendous scrutiny at that dinner. And we know Agnes could scrutinize. Well, apparently I passed the test, and 1 year later, we had our wedding on the back lawn of their magnificent home. The wedding was in July, a day like today, very hot, very steamy, late afternoon. Yet earlier that morning, Agnes donned a wide-brimmed straw hat, a bathing suit top, lipstick, and got on the tractor to cut the hay all day, right up to 45 minutes before the wedding was to begin. As people started to arrive, she came out in a long purple dress, a different wide-brimmed hat, and greeted our guests as if she had primped all day. Classic Agnes. And so began the beginning of my long, deep, rich friendship with Agnes. She became my adopted mother-in-law and our children's adopted grandmother. So many of us have heard her entertaining stories about growing up, living on a farm in Connecticut, milking cows before school. My kids loved hearing these stories, especially when she said that she used to complain to her father that other kids went to hotels on vacation and that they never did. And he apparently said to her, "Aggie, if you can find a hotel that will take our family and 400 dairy cows, we will go." End of discussion. Or the stories of how her mother got up at 4 a.m. to make breakfast for all the hired help on the farm, and then she went to work to teach at the local school. No complaining, end of discussion. Agnes clearly approached her life with much of that down-home wisdom and philosophy that she learned from her parents. Work hard, don't complain about hardships, appreciate what you have, and help other people. And prepare all your food from scratch. Everything we ate at her house was prepared by her, grown by her in her prolific garden, picked by her that morning, and you'd have it for dinner. Pie was always made with fruit from her garden and trees, apples, blueberries, rhubarb, all hand-picked. She had a closet of preserved fruits, a freezer filled with frozen vegetables and meals. I never saw a loaf of bread in her house that was purchased from a store. Classic Agnes. Eventually, I became her colleague at URI, where I worked for 30 years, and I heard about her outstanding reputation as a teacher. So when I decided to get a graduate degree here at URI, I chose to take her class in Providence as an elective. She was thrilled. She said, "Great, I will drive you to Providence every week." Well, for those of you who know me, I'm a cautious driver, and I don't like to be in fast cars at all. Ask my husband. However, I would faithfully drive up with her in her Mercedes sports car with Agnes speeding up the highway. Leo, right? I would gently say, "Maybe you should slow down a bit." And she'd laugh out loud and say, "Oh, I'll never get a ticket. I know all the state police. Many of them were my former students, and I run seminars for this police department. I'll never get a ticket." I truly don't think she ever did. But here's a side story. One time, she was driving up 95, not with me, by the way, and she got stopped by the police, who clocked her driving over 90 miles an hour. "Ma'am, you are going over 90 miles an hour," he said. And she replied, "Oh, officer, I thought that sign that says 95 meant that the speed limit was 95. I am so sorry." She did not get a ticket. Perfect example of her use of persuasive speech. And by the way, if you think she took it easy on me in that class because we were like family, well, you know the end of that story. Work hard, no complaining, end of discussion. Agnes lost 2 husbands, so there were many years that she lived alone. But she did love to socialize, so I went out with her a lot. We had many lunches and dinners and outings at Rhode Island restaurants and theaters, and always, at some point of the meal or event, someone would walk up to her and say, "Excuse me, Dr. Doody, I don't know if you remember me, but I am a former student." And every time, that person would proceed to tell her not only how much they loved and appreciated her classes, but also how much she had taught them about life. Not about just communications, but about life. And when the former student walked away, she would often turn to me and say, "I don't remember that student's name," because she had so many, thousands of them. But she was always visibly moved, grateful, and touched. And later in life, she would say to me, "You know, Nancy, I really don't understand what I did. I just talked to them and listened to them. I really don't think I did anything out of the ordinary." Well, as we all know, she was not only out of the ordinary, she was extraordinary. Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy. Our next speaker was Agnes's close confidant, personal physician, and a close member of our extended family for 46 years, Dr. Heidi Coomer.
Thank you, Doug, and good morning, everybody. It's really a pleasure to be here. Last time I was here was when we inaugurated this auditorium, so it's really wonderful. Agnes used to say, if you give people the option between being in a pine box or giving the eulogy, most people would choose the pine box. Now, I'm actually one of those people, maybe because I never had Agnes in class, but I was extremely privileged for almost 50 years to have Agnes as a teacher of life according to her. For all her brilliance, Agnes did have flaws. She was lousy at foreign languages. She almost didn't get her PhD at Penn State because she kept flunking the foreign language requirement, which in her case was French. And I believe that her later struggles with computer language had to do with the fact that she was missing that foreign language gene. But if it hadn't been for that flaw, I would not be standing here today. So in 1977, a former student of hers, David Reese, had organized for her to get her hips replaced in Erlangen, Germany. As many of you know, she had terribly arthritic hips and had some botched surgeries before that. So she went to Erlangen, and after the surgery, she was sent to a rehab facility in southern Bavaria for several weeks. Now, Agnes spoke no German, really, aside from PT, had not much to do, and so she was writing letters. One of those letters was sent to Bill Coleman, a photographer whom she had worked for when she was a student at Penn State. And because she hadn't a clue where she was, she wrote down every single village that was on that lake on the back of the envelope as the sent from address. Remarkably, Bill recognized that he knew our family in Rottach, where we had moved to from State College several years before. He gave us a call immediately, said, "You need to go visit my friend Aggie." She hated that name, by the way. So we went the next day and walked in and said, "Is there anything you need?" And she looked at us and said, "A decent shampoo?" So that was the beginning of a beautiful friendship. As many of you know, Agnes and her first husband, Arthur, loved to travel. And thanks to Arthur's retired military status, they were able to travel MAC, or military air cargo flights, which meant that you could go on the routes if space was available. And it also meant that they didn't always get to where they wanted to go, much less when they wanted to be there. And so one year, I remember we had organized a dinner party to introduce them to our German circle of friends, and the guests of honor were stuck at an air base in Rota, Spain. After I graduated from gymnasium, or what Agnes liked to call an academic concentration camp, I wanted to move back to the US, and my initial stop was One Post Road. Not long thereafter, I got a call that I had been accepted to medical school in Marburg, Germany. Now, my first inclination was absolutely not. I had just come back to the US. Agnes and I had gotten very close. She introduced me as the daughter she never had. She could have easily blown it off and just kept me nearby. But that's not Agnes. She sat me down. She asked a lot of questions, all of which clearly showed that I would be an absolute fool not to accept that slot. So off I went back across the Atlantic, and for the next 6 years, we had a correspondence of at least 1 or 2 letters every week. I kept every single one of those letters. She blissfully discarded mine. I had arranged to complete required clinical rotations at hospitals here in the US, including here in South County and at Boston City Hospital. And it didn't matter whether I was fully entrenched in medical studies or hospital duties, as my brethren, especially Brother Michael, can attest to. If you're staying at one post, you have to work for room and board. So one July weekend, I had just finished my term and a grueling set of board exams in Germany. I was supposed to catch my breath at one post before starting an ICU rotation in Boston. And Agnes had sent a former student, Jeff Wright, to the airport to pick me up with the instructions to get back immediately. We pulled into the driveway, and there was no hello, there was no how are you. It was get the hell upstairs and changed and bring in the hay before it starts to rain. Pulling my weight, baling hay, tending the garden, or pruning fruit trees was one thing. But I will never forget the morning she summoned me to her bedside, saying she wasn't feeling well and I had to go in and teach her class. Now, Agnes had a great sense of humor. But her tone made it very clear that A, she was serious, and B, she would not accept no for an answer. She said it was her persuasion class and that the students had been asked to prepare presentations and I would critique them. So I asked her, and what are my qualifications vis-a-vis these students? And she looked at me and she said, it's a class in persuasion. Just tell them you're a doctoral candidate, which was not a lie. So I didn't know my way around campus. So a colleague of hers, George Dillevue, escorted me to the classroom that morning, all the while shaking his head. Needless to say, I was extremely nervous, and in the beginning of the class, my voice definitely cracked. Agnes couldn't wait to ask the students for evaluations afterwards, which of course she shared with me. Not exactly glowing. I did get her back years later when I slated her to give a lecture at a critical care anesthesiology meeting in Montreal that I had organized. And she did admit that she was nervous before. I, too, asked the attendees for evaluations afterwards, and of course, in her case, they were glowing. Agnes certainly understood hardship. Her father was deaf. She was crippled early on by terrible arthritis, and she was sympathetic to the hardships of others. But none of that ever slowed her down, and she'd never let anybody use their hardship as an excuse. She subscribed to the school of hard knocks and tough love, and she went to bat for her students, colleagues, loved ones, any cause she deemed worthy or considered unfair. Whether feared or revered, she definitely commanded attention and respect on all sides. Her wonderful home, One Post, had an open door policy. You never knew which student, current or former, from which part of the globe, would come waltzing in calling out for mama. Everyone here knows Agnes was larger than life. She was famous for her at times outrageous hats, jewelry, especially the earrings, and outfits. She loved to celebrate, and she would use any excuse to do so. She told Arthur one of her requirements for a home was it had to have a room large enough for a party of 50 at the drop of a hat. One Post Road certainly fit that bill. There, Agnes introduced me to some of her favorite gentlemen, Jack Daniels, Johnny Walker, and top shelf good old Jameson, no last name required. She also loved Mr. Bubbly, especially when served in hollow stem glasses. Also a must at every party was a special headpiece. Agnes would commission Kenyon's Floral to make something for her for each special occasion. Sparklers and a gold tiara for her 50th birthday, or pencils and mini chalkboard for the celebration of her teaching award. Those were good times. Agnes also knew great loss. She had been very close to her brother Dan, who was part of the first U.S. Everest expedition and died climbing in the White Mountains. And she had to bury not one, but two beloved husbands. Without question, it was her students, her teaching, and the love and support of both immediate and extended family that helped her through all those very difficult times. And of course, established rituals like picnics on the rocks in Narragansett or the Chosen family's annual tree lighting in December. Being stepmothers was something we had in common. She always believed that love was thicker than blood, and certainly the experience with my three children, Toby actually got married at One Post as well, and my loved brothers and sisters here today are a testament to that belief in families of choice. Had Agnes not gone against her heartstrings in sending me back to medical school in Germany, I would not have met my wonderful husband, nor would I have had the beautiful family I do. So when it was time to go against my heartstrings and do what was best for her, what I knew she wanted, and why she had chosen me as her health proxy, I did not hesitate either. Once asked about her career and life choices, she said to a journalist, "I would do it all over again exactly the same way." Well, Dr. Doody, Agnes, Mama, so would we. Cheers.
Thank you, Heidi. Agnes and I became very close since the 60s, and like other members of her extended family, shared a 50-plus year parental relationship that was unique. All of us and Agnes's extended family had unique relationships and roles with her. She embraced my wife, Linda, as a daughter, and she became grandma for our daughter, Jamie. She was there when Jamie was born and there for her first birthday party. Agnes stood up and gave a moving, touching tribute at Jamie's bat mitzvah when she was 13. And she stood with us in Ann Arbor when Jamie defended her thesis and graduated the University of Michigan with honors. She was ubiquitous in our life, as we were in hers, as she was with all of us in her extended family. I said earlier she charged us with various roles. Mine was sort of to be her parole officer and try and keep her out of trouble, a role that I failed miserably at. She was impossible to contain. Whether it was her exotic sports cars or wild hats, preposterous earrings, or the chutzpah she had to talk her way past security at the Indian Embassy in New York City so that she could meet Prime Minister Nehru, Agnes was fearless with a penchant for mischief and the outrageous. She could think on her feet faster than anybody I know. One of my favorite stories of Agnes is one that few people know about at URI. Winnie does. For if they did, she might not have, she might have ended her career, or it might have ended her career. So it was the early 1960s, and the scene was the National Debate Tournament, which was held at West Point since 1947. Now, the National Debate Tournament is the Super Bowl of intercollegiate debate, where 4 of the top teams in the nation compete over a 2.5-day schedule on a brutal competition for the national championship. Now, Agnes, who had been coaching URI's debate team into national prominence, didn't have a team in the competition, but she was invited as a prestigious guest judge. Now, unknown to Agnes and concurrent with the National Debate Tournament, the United States Congress was conducting its 5-year review of the Academy under the direction, the review is being conducted by General Omar Bradley, Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So on the Friday evening of the weekend event, after the afternoon debate competition, Agnes joined 3 of her colleagues for a few cocktails. Well, one drink led to another, and the party went on well into the evening. Round about midnight, the revelers rolled into the beautiful Hotel Thayer, which sits right on the campus of West Point on the Hudson River, only to discover that there was just one parking space remaining in the lot, and that one had a sign that said, "Reserved for General Omar Bradley." Agnes, feeling no pain, gets out of the car, takes the sign, throws it over the wall, and gestures to her colleague, Herb James, who's the coach of Dartmouth driving the car, to back right in. Suddenly, a frantic man comes running out of the Hotel Thayer, screaming, "What the hell did I just see you do?" This man was the hotel manager, obviously waiting for the arrival of General Bradley. Agnes, being Agnes, said, "Well, you just saw me throw General Bradley's sign over the wall, and I'd be happy to fetch it and bring it back if you're willing to throw this Volkswagen over the wall because we need a parking space." Incensed, the man ran back inside, and within moments, the military police, flashing lights, sirens, arrived on the scene. The 2 MPs in charge step out of the car. The hotel manager immediately says, "I want this woman arrested for destroying military property." Without batting an eye, the officers look around, they see the crumpled sign, they cuff Agnes and whisk her away. Suddenly, things got somber. She found herself being escorted down a series of large stone steps into what appeared to be a medieval dungeon, which was really a military jail in West Point. And the duty officer began starting some paperwork. Agnes was saying to herself, "I wonder if they're really serious about this." As the booking officer asks her name, address, age, height, and weight, Agnes decided to lighten up the mood a little bit and say, "A gentleman does not ask a lady personal questions like that. Have you no manners?" Well, obviously, this duty officer hadn't arrested a civilian, let alone a woman, wasn't sure quite how to handle that. He was dumbfounded and hesitant, but the hotel manager standing there knew that Agnes had had a few cocktails, and he said, "And I want her charged with intoxication on military property as well." So the duty officer turns to Agnes and says, "Ma'am, how long have you been drinking?" Agnes, "Since I was 14. Yeah. That moment created a bit of smiles, but it evaporated quickly, and Agnes, who thinks on her feet really quickly, realizes the gravity of this situation could be going south on her, and she needed to take command. So out of the blue, Agnes goes, "Apparently you gentlemen want to make more of this than it is, and I want to talk to my attorney. And I might add, my father was very active in the Democratic Party, and my attorney is Robert F. Kennedy, the Attorney General of the United States. Agnes was calling a trick play here. Suddenly the mood changed because these gentlemen didn't know whether or not this was a crazy woman or whether she was the real deal. And by the way, we have the National Review going on, so controversy was something they certainly didn't want to have. So after a while, first to speak was the hotel manager, who said, well, perhaps we could settle things. Agnes, though, continuing on the offense, said, not without my attorney present, unless you're willing to drop all charges. So after about a half hour of discussion and negotiations, the manager finally agreed to drop all charges if Agnes would apologize. Agnes graciously complied, and it would seem that Agnes dodged a bullet. But the story doesn't end there. The last night of the tournament was the celebration banquet hosted by the Commandant of West Point, General William Westmoreland. Earlier in the afternoon, Agnes gets a surprise knock on the door, and a West Point cadet delivers her a personal invitation to join General Westmoreland at the head table. Uncertain as to what this meant, she graciously accepted, but she was well aware of the incident the night before and wasn't quite sure what all of this would mean. Sure enough, at the appointed hour, a senior class West Point cadet appeared at Agnes's door, escorted her to the dinner, formally presented her to General Westmoreland, and Agnes put on her beautiful New England charm, and no one mentioned the incident, and no one in the room, including Agnes, knew why the hell she was at the head table with General Westmoreland. At the end of the evening, General Westmoreland leaned over to Agnes and said, Ms. Doody, I hope you enjoyed your stay and everything was to your satisfaction. Agnes graciously thanked him and said everything was delightful, shook his hand, began walking away, and as she was walking away, General Westmoreland said, oh, Miss Doody, by the way, give my regards to Bobby. And that was outrageous Agnes. But as outrageous Agnes was, she was born with a gift to change people's lives, and she truly spent every waking minute doing it. She lived life to the fullest. She challenged, she dissented, she pioneered, she inspired, she taught with passion. She learned from her students, she gave of herself freely, she created breakthroughs, she laughed, she danced, she believed in her students, she loved, she traveled the world, she could walk through walls, and she lived her life with intention. And when the harsh storms of personal tragedy came and the wind didn't blow her away, she adjusted her sails and powered on. I know I speak for all of Agnes's former students. It's saying she was a beacon of inspiration in our lives, reminding us that with passion, perseverance, and commitment to teaching, extraordinary deeds can be achieved. Her legacy is a testament to the transformative power passionate teachers can have to profoundly energize and empower people to work for a better world. My wife has a saying, don't cry because it's over, smile because it happened. Today I'm smiling because I am forever grateful for Agnes Doody in our lives. Thank you. Our final speaker this morning is Agnes's stepson, Drew Jeffrey.
First, thank you all for coming today. I know she would have loved to have seen all of you. Words and phrases to describe the memories of Mom and what they might mean to each of us. As you've heard the word so often, one post road, and all the people associated with it. The dinners, the parties, and the holidays. The food and drinks. Mom being bigger than life and doing the outrageous. Her hats and her earrings. Arthur's Park. Peaceful and inspiring. Bamboo growing wild. And the Christmas tree. The kitchen as a social gathering place. Canning and preserving. Many of you enjoyed the fruits of that labor. Getting ready for a party or a dinner. Gardening with friends and family. The cars. The Jaguar XK 120. What a car. And her license, talk. The electric car, which you might have forgotten about, one of the first in South County. Using the tractor and the John Deere mower to take care of One Post Road, and the kids who got to drive each at a very early age. And the address itself. The post office tried to change the address to something like 284R Post Road. Can you imagine a better address than One Post Road? Mom made sure the address never changed. Arthur, the love of her life, who supported and showed her to be herself. Ellis, so kind and endearing. He came for a weekend, and he stayed at One Post Road the rest of his life. You've heard a lot about travel. I asked Mom, would you make a list of all the countries you've been to? 73. Amazing. I know she would have wanted 75. Bicycling in town and the URI and the headlines it produced, especially with the URI administration. Mom's hair. Do you remember the Rotary calendar with discreet nude pictures? Mom picture with her hair down to her knees. Equity for all. She wanted each person to have the opportunity to learn to their full potential, no matter gender or race. Family. The influence on my children, Meg and Will. Meg gained a love of travel and learning about different cultures. She became a teacher. Mom took Will under her wings and helped him with his writing. Will is now in the Masters of a Fine Art program at Sewanee. And as for me, I graduated from college, not with stellar grades, but as she did to so many of us, she saw the potential, and properly motivated, we could be good students. And she helped get me into URI's MBA program. I wanted to prove to her that I was worth the risk. And like so many of us, I made straight A's. Family, again. The influence of her parents, Dan and Carrie Doody, and her brother Dan. The Doody clan. Her sister's family, the Bradleys and the nephews. My sister Jill's family, the McKenzie family, Becky and David and their families. She embraced us all, including the extended family members, Rotarians, former students, the URI community, and oh, so many more. Mom's passion never showed more than, I don't know if you remember, when she ran for office. She didn't win, but she gave it everything she had. But as you've heard so often today, Mom's real passion, teaching in the classroom. And her ability, through tough love, to get the most out of her students. Her debate teams, she loved to go against the Ivy League universities. And you know what? URI held its own and won a lot of debates. And her passion to help those who are not in her classroom to become better communicators, and I would like to think better people. One of the instruments she used was the purple pen, which most of us in this room got to see firsthand. And since it was such an important part of Mom, I had the purple pen mounted, and it will go, and they will go in the back to always be here. What an honor for Mom to have this auditorium named after her. We all remember her retirement party in 2010 and all the fun we had. But you might not have remembered about another dedication that the women's rowing team named a skull after her in 2016, the Agnes G. Doody. She had trouble walking and her dementia was present. But I was never prouder of her as she commanded the room and gave a wonderful speech. And the rowing team showed such respect for her. So, I need your help to send Mom off as she would have wanted to be and to celebrate the life of Dr. Agnes G. Doody. So please stand. And I'd like you to repeat this phrase with me 3 times. And it is, hip, hip, hooray. So everyone with gusto, hip, hip, hooray! Hip, hip, hooray! Hip, hip, hooray! Thank you all for coming to Mom's celebration and being a part of her life, and to the speakers for their insight and memories. Thank you very much.